The last time I explained to you in detail about work as meditation, work as worship, also known as Karma Yoga. So it's important to understand that work is recommended by Krishna as the primary means of self-purification. And in fact, he discourages people from renouncing the world. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Sanyasastu mahavao dukkham aptuma yogatah yoga yukta munir brahma na chirena adhigacchati. If you take to renouncing the world without having attained union with God, then you will get only sorrow. Whereas one who works in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, he attains the supreme without delay. So Krishna points out that the primary means of purification sought by yogis is through the performance of their work and their duties. Kayena manasa buddhaya kevalairindriyerapi yogina karma kurvanti sangam tyaktva atma shuddhaye. So with their body, with their mind, with their intelligence, with their limbs, with their senses, even yogis engage constantly in working, and this is for the sake of self-purification. There are some aspects of the Bhagavad Gita which you must understand. There is God, that is Bhagavan. There is the individual soul or the Atma. There is also Prakriti. And I pointed out that Pavaka Visfulinga, that God is the fire, the souls, the Atmas are the sparks that emerge from that fire. And because of this, there are two options. One is you can get further entangled in Prakriti, and the other is that you can go and reunite with God. So the sparks that get lost in the smoke or the souls who get entangled in Prakriti, they are engaged in acts of karma. Whereas those who are engaged in acts which help them to return to God, the sparks that return to the fire, these are acts of yoga. So, by all means, friends, engage in acts of yoga, not acts of karma. And when you act without the desire for your fruit, whether it's a physical fruit, emotional fruit, intellectual fruit, ego fruit, without any desire for any of these fruits, you act without the sense of doership, that I am the doer, and you are not attached to inaction, then that work is an act of worship, which you should perform with the attitude Om Tat Sat, that Lord, this is performed for you, not for me. So you are part Atma, and you carry with you the burden of your Prakriti. And it is not the Atma that does any work, nor is it God who does any work. It is the Prakriti that does its work. And because Prakriti does its work, you should understand that in fact, you see yourself as Atma, you don't do any work yourself. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The foolish living entity imagines himself to be the doer of activities which are indeed performed by Prakriti. Karya karanam kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritva hetur uchyate. So, work is performed actually by your prakriti, which is part of your material envelope. It is not performed by the soul. But because you imagine that you are the doer, you enjoy or you suffer. So, today I'm going to digress from the Bhagavad Gita proper. I'm going to give you a presentation which I've given before, which explains the science behind the philosophy of work. And to explain to you the science behind this philosophy of work, I'll request you to put up with this, shall we say, presentation. So this presentation is on who the hell wants to work. Why do we work? What happens to us when we work? And what does science have to say about it? So today I'm going to run through this presentation, which I've given before, to give you some idea of these subjects: psychology, neuroscience, flow, transactional and transformational work. So what do people think work is? Well, politically, sometimes you have the left which says that work is physical labor, that is real work. So workers of the world unite. Those of you who are physically laboring unite. Of course, physical labor is work, but intellectual labor is also work. In fact, more and more work is becoming intellectual, and perhaps all of you are engaged in intellectual work. Others say that work is something that is paid for. That an economist would say that if you work and you don't get paid, well, that's not really work. So there's no work and no pay. And that work really is defined as economic activity. But is all work economic activity? What about the homemaker? The homemaker is not paid for her work, but yet she works with love, with devotion, with sacrifice. She feeds the family, she raises children. Another definition of work is that work is a transfer of energy. But this is how I would like to define work. Work is that effort which adds value to the world. When you perform activity where you are adding value to the world, you are engaged in work. And let me tell you this, that when you add value to the world, you discover a unique value within yourself. So work is that effort which adds value to the world. And when you add value to the world, you simultaneously discover value within yourself. So why do we work? Many of us would say that we work for leisure, so that we can enjoy ourselves outside the workplace, maintain a standard of living and lifestyle that we feel we deserve, so that we can pursue our hobbies and our leisure interests. But my friends, the real reason we work is to occupy the mind. Because when you are occupied in doing work, your mind becomes disciplined, and thus the disciplined mind becomes more orderly and troubles you less and less. Indeed, it is very hard work to control the mind. It is very hard work to discipline the mind. But hard work, my friends, will control your mind. It is hard work to control the mind, but hard work also controls the mind. Therefore, simply by engaging in hard work, even without knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, even without knowledge of the philosophy of work, simply by keeping your mind occupied, it is redirected from its natural destructive tendencies. Every nation builder knows that when unemployment rises in a nation, that unemployment breeds crime, it breeds terrorism. Because that mind which is unoccupied is quickly led by the wrong people on the path of destruction and mayhem. We work for self-esteem because indeed, when we no longer work, we no longer have self-esteem and we go down the path of degeneracy and become addicted to various substances, and finally we become degenerate human beings. So we work just so that we can have some self-esteem. But the real reason we work, and I'm going to do this in greater detail, is that we work for what is known as self-actualization, for fulfilling the purpose of your creation, for realizing that you have a purpose in life. You will see that many retired people, they go downhill very fast because they feel they no longer have a purpose in their life. So it's so important to work, it's so important to add value to the world. Because when you add value to the world, you believe that you have a purpose in your life, a purpose to your creation. And that indeed fights mental illness and makes you happy and fulfilled. You also get an opportunity to express your core competencies and abilities so that whatever talents, whatever skills, whatever professional abilities you have acquired in your lifetime, these you can express. And in expressing these abilities and competencies, you will feel fulfilled. And finally, when you are experiencing working at your optimal level, you have an experience of flow, which is nothing other than meditation. And we will come to this in a very short time. So there is a psychology at work and there's a psychology of work. And Abraham Maslow was the one who brought this out most clearly in the 20th century. Although the Bhagavad Gita brought this out long back, more than 500 years before the Common Era. So Abraham Maslow was a psychotherapist. And although he was a psychotherapist, he believed that it was too slow to improve the world's population one by one, because a psychotherapist deals with one person at a time. So he wanted to move towards transforming people, moving them towards the psychology of being. And he wanted to do this en masse. And to do this, he developed this theory of self-actualization, or Maslow's hierarchy. That at the basic level, we need air, food, drink, shelter, warmth, sex, sleep. Then we need safety, protection, security, order, limits. We then need love, affection, belonging, relationships. Then we need a sense of achievement, a sense of contributing to the world, of status, responsibility, reputation. And when all these have been fulfilled, when you work without any desire for fruit, but you begin to work in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, when you are working truly as an instrument of the divine, then this work, Maslow said, is called self-actualization. If you plan on being anything less than you are capable of being, you will probably be unhappy for every day of your life. So Maslow brought about work as mass psychotherapy. Inadvertently, without realizing it, he hit upon the same message that was there in the Bhagavad Gita, that it is hard work to silence the mind, but hard work silences the mind. Is your mind silent? If your mind is not silent, then realize this, that while it is hard work to silence the mind, your hard work will silence your mind. And therefore, Abraham Maslow thought about work as a therapy, work as a search for value that you add to the world. And as a result, you find a unique value within yourself. In the last 20, 30 years, we have begun to understand so much about the human brain. And largely this is due to radio imaging. And imaging sciences have contributed immensely to our understanding about how the brain works. And we have now understood that a lot of our brain, just like Freud pointed out, is working at an unconscious level. That our conscious mind, which is in contact with the external world, is just the tip of the iceberg. And the real part of your subtle body, the real part of your mind, is but the unconscious mind. And so we realize that brain cells don't work individually, they work in a circuit. And there are many circuits that run the brain. And not only is it many circuits that run the brain, but we should also understand that the primary default circuit that we have in our brain is the circuit that goes about creating the ego and the sense of self. And when you're not thinking of something constructive to do, your brain is going to the default mode circuit. And that default mode circuit is also known as the social cognition mode. It is a mode which helps you to create your sense of self, which helps you to heal your ego, to reconstruct your ego, to reconstruct your sense of self. And therefore, in these efforts, it actually leads you towards distress and towards suffering. Benjamin Libet, long before modern radio imaging or helped us to understand the brain, in the 70s, he conducted an elegant experiment with the limited sources he had at his disposal. And he pointed out that in fact, it is your unconscious mind that makes all your decisions. It is your Jada Prakriti that makes all your decisions. It is your Jad Prakriti that precipitates action. It is your Jad Prakriti which makes you engage in work. And while the conscious brain thinks that it is working, in truth, it is really your unconscious mind that is working. So in this elegant experiment designed by Benjamin Libet, he placed an EEG leads on the brain, on the head of the person. He also put an EMG on the arm so that we could make out when the arm or the fingers moved. And on the television screen, which was very rudimentary at that time, he showed different numbers. And he told him, whenever you choose a number, you move your index finger upwards. And he compared the EMG with the EEG to understand when you made the decision and when your EEG recorded that decision. And to understand when you made that decision to raise your finger, you had to look on that TV screen and say that when I saw number 9, that is when I decided to raise my finger. Or when I saw number 5, that is when I decided to raise my finger. And this would then be compared with the EMG and the EEG, the electromyography and the electroencephalography. And he found, in fact, the miraculous thing that long before you consciously decide to do something, there are electrical activity in the unconscious part of your brain which initiates the action, which means that before you pick up a glass of water, before you decide to pick up a glass of water and drink that water, your brain has already decided that you should do it. Before you reach out and pick up that extra slice of chocolate cake, your brain has already decided that you are going to pick up the chocolate cake. So before you consciously decide to do something, unconscious electrical impulses in the brain demonstrate that actually your brain is deciding, the dead matter in your brain, the jada prakriti in your brain, not the conscious brain, but the unconscious brain, is deciding what you do. And while his experiments showed that the brain decides before you decide by 6 milliseconds, as a matter of fact, using radio imaging as early as last year or the year before that, experiment showed that your brain decides to do something sometimes as long as 6 to 8 seconds before you actually do something. So if there's a chocolate cake on the table and you decide to take that extra slice, there is 6 to 8 seconds before you consciously decide to pick it up. Your brain has already decided. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. So your prakriti, your unconscious mind is deciding what to do 6 to 8 seconds before you consciously think you are making the decision. So in actual fact, Prakriti does everything. You only imagine that you are the doer. And because you imagine you are the doer, you enjoy and you suffer. Karya karanam kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate purusha sukha dukhanam bhoktritva hetur uchyate. So it is your unconscious that determines most of your decisions in life, most of your actions in life, most of your movements in your life are all determined by your unconscious. And this unconscious electrical activity precedes your decision making by your conscious brain by as much as 6 to 8 seconds. So the question is, do we have free will? If our unconscious mind is taking all the decisions, if our unconscious mind is deciding what we should be doing and how we move and what we eat and what we do, then is there anything like free will? Because the unconscious is forcing us, is forcing the conscious mind to take a decision. And the answer is that we don't really have free will. We don't have, therefore, it is a waste of time to develop willpower. Willpower does not work. So, what works? We have what is known as WONT power. So won't power is what works for us, because we can say no. We can say no to work. We can say no to spending or gambling or nicotine or marijuana or relationships or heroin or sex. We can say no to cocaine because we have the ability to not do something, although it is our prakriti that forces us to do something. Therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says very clearly that do not be attached to inaction. Krishna says, Nahi kaschid shanamapi jatu tistatya karmakrit. Not for one instant you can remain without doing action, because Prakriti is forcing the action. But you can say no to that type of action. You have the right to say no. You can be attached to inaction. Therefore, Arjun was driven by his Kshatriya nature to fight that war. But he had the choice of saying, no, I won't take part in that war. And Krishna was explaining to him that stop allowing your ahankar or ego to put a blockade in the natural flow of your prakriti. Because indeed, your prakriti is driven by God. Maya dhyaksena prakriti suyate sa characharam hetuna nena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. Prakriti may be unconscious. Prakriti is not under your control, but it is under God's control. It is not under your control. Don't imagine that you have willpower. Krishna says, Mamayvamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashastindriyani prakriti karsati. You imagine that you are struggling with your mind and your senses. Manashastindriyani prakriti stani karshati. You are struggling because you are a fragment of the divine. God controls prakriti, you control nothing. As a matter of fact, the analogy I may give is that of the Mahout and the elephant. The Mahout sits on the elephant, and the Mahout thinks he's telling the elephant how to go home, that this is the path to take or that is the path to take. But in truth, the elephant takes all the decisions, and the elephant forces the Mahout to go where it wants to go. The Mahout may struggle, the Mahout may use his elephant goad or ankush. He may try to force the elephant to go this way or that way, but ultimately it is the elephant that succeeds. How many New Year resolutions did you make? That I shall lose weight, I shall stop smoking, I shall stop this, I shall stop that, and that I will no longer do this or I will no longer do that. But were you able to keep any of these resolutions? How can you keep a resolution when it is not your conscious mind, but your unconscious mind that decides what to do? The conscious mind makes resolutions, the unconscious mind breaks these resolutions. So volition and action are functions of the unconscious mind that performs perfectly in the right environment with the correct stimulus. And how does the unconscious mind perform? The unconscious mind is your subtle body, where you have laid down sanskaras. Your unconscious mind is your bundle of karmas. Your unconscious mind is your sanskaras, or all the impressions that have been laid down across centuries. Your unconscious mind is nothing but a bundle of your vasanas, or inchoate, unexpressed, unknown desires, unconscious desires. And this bundle of karmas, which is your unconscious mind, drives you to perform activity and perform actions. To help you to understand how this actually happens, I'm going to explain to you how to perfect levels of action. The first level is called unconscious incompetence. If you have a 5-year-old child, maybe a 5-year-old girl, who sits on the father's lap, maybe 3-year-old girl or 2-year-old girl, who sits on the father's lap and holds the steering wheel, and you ask her, "Are you driving the car?" She will say, "Yes, I'm driving the car. I'm such a good driver." So she is hardly 2.5 years old, but she doesn't know how to drive the car, and she doesn't even know that she doesn't know how to drive the car. So she's unconscious of her incompetence. When that same little girl is 6 years old or 7 years old, and you ask her, "Can you drive the car?" She knows she can barely see beyond the steering wheel. She knows her feet do not reach the accelerator and the brake or the clutch. And therefore she says, "No, I don't know how to drive the car." So from unconscious incompetence, she has now moved to the level of what we call as conscious incompetence, because she now knows that she doesn't know how to drive the car. Finally, she is 18 years old. The driving instructor is seated next to her. And while driving the car, you are on the back seat and you are asking her, "Are you comfortable driving? How are things? How is the road ahead?" And that 18-year-old girl now looks back at you and fires you. "Don't talk to me. Can't you see I'm driving the car?" This is conscious competence. She's driving the car, but she's driving the car consciously, and it requires 100% of her attention. Therefore, she doesn't have any spare attention to give to listen to you or answer your questions, because 100% of her conscious mind is dedicated to demonstrating competence. Now, we look a few years down the road, 5 years down the road, and the same girl is talking on her cell phone, which she is actually propping up with her shoulder against her ear. She is also munching a sandwich and occasionally sipping a drink which is there in the cup holder. The radio is also running in the background. So she's listening also to music. And she's zipping between cars in the traffic. In and out, she's zipping. Talking to her boyfriend, listening to the music, eating and drinking. And what's more, one hand of hers is outside the window where she's waving her fingers to dry her nail polish. But still, she's driving very well. This is called unconscious competence. She doesn't know that she's driving well, but now the unconscious mind has taken over. And because the unconscious mind has taken over, therefore, now she's operating with perfect competence. How many times have you, my friend, been driving the car and you have been so lost in your thoughts that you passed the store or you passed something where you needed to stop and pick up some item? Because who was driving the car? The unconscious was driving the car, and your mind was lost in thoughts. And therefore, because the unconscious did not know that it had to stop there, you just go and you continued driving ahead. So all action moves from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. Therefore, every action you perform goes through these stages. And as you keep performing actions, they become embedded in your mind in unconscious competence. And therefore, what really happens to you is that all your life, your decisions, your independent actions are really stimulated by your past karmas. And the more actions you perform, the more they become embedded within your unconscious, which actually performs everything. Daniel Kahneman wrote this beautiful book on thinking fast and thinking slow. That there are times when we think fast, which is reflexive, and that reflexiveness is but the result of the habits of the past, our karmic reflexes. And on the other hand, when we slow down, when we create a space between stimulus and response, we are able to apply our conscious mind and think carefully. There are occasions when we need to think consciously, and there are most of the time when we think unconsciously and reflexively. So, in fact, if you want to go ahead in life to do whatever you need to do, you need to train the unconscious. You need to create habits. A person who comes from a professional college, a management college, or any college doesn't have habits. Therefore, no matter where he is graduated from or postgraduated from, he actually is of little use to the company that employs him. But when he has work experience, that work experience, that work X really helps you to perform well, because that is where in your work experience you have created habits, you have created and trained the unconscious to perform and deliver results. So you should learn how to work expertly. And to learn expertly, you should learn from Malcolm Gladwell, who's written this book called Outliers. And in Outliers, he explains that when you have put in 10,000 hours of working, these 10,000 hours of working produce unconscious competence that helps you to perform and excel beyond what other people perform and excel. He gives the example of the Beatles. The Beatles were such bad musicians and they performed so poorly as a band that in their hometown of Liverpool, they could not get a single engagement to perform. So what did the Beatles do? The Beatles went to Hamburg. And when they went to Hamburg, they took a job which required them to play almost continuously for 18, 19 hours at a time, with just 5-minute breaks to eat and drink and go to the toilet. And when they finished 10,000 hours, these Beatles had ingrained in their unconscious the sense of music. Then they came back to Liverpool as the Beatles and they became world famous. So the secret is that teaching or learning skills at the conscious level is only the beginning. It is only practice and experience of 10,000 hours that can allow you to gain true mastery over the work performed. Because that 10,000 hours ingrains all those skills at the level of the unconscious. It makes it part of your unconscious repertoire, and therefore it helps you to excel because most of your actions are unconscious. Now we come to the idea of flow. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote this beautiful book on the psychology of optimal experience. And in this book, he explained that there are people who find that when you are doing work, if you are given work that is too simple to do and your skills are very high, you will be bored. If you are given challenges that are very high and your skills are very low, you are driven to anxiety. But when you find the optimal match between the challenges of your work and the skills that you engage in, then you find what we call as optimal flow. And what happens in this optimal flow? In this optimal flow, you experience challenging activity that requires skill, clear goals and feedback. And what happens is you become completely absorbed in the work. Your awareness is merged in your action completely. You lose your sense of self during that period. You lose your sense of time. When you look at your watch, you say, oh, I've been working for so long, I didn't realize it. You've lost your physical sense of appetite. You forgot that you missed your lunch. You forgot that you have to go and empty your bowels and your bladder. So this is what happens when you experience flow. There is loss of self, loss of time, and you're completely absorbed in the work. This is work as meditation. And this, my friends, is karma yoga. This is work when you have not working for the fruits, when you are doing it in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, when you are completely absorbed in work for its own sake, when you have lost sense of time, you have lost sense of physical appetites and needs. This is meditation. And in your work, to engage in karma yoga, not only must you give up all the fruits, physical, emotional, intellectual, ego wise, give up all the fruit, but also, my friends, you have to find that state where your skills are so perfectly matched to your job at hand that actually neuroimaging as well as other other imaging techniques have demonstrated that the state of the brain while working in flow and the state of the brain while engaging and while sitting in meditation is the same. This is why I said it is work as meditation, because when you're engaged in work in karma yoga, then in truth you are putting your time into meditating, and that meditation calms your mind, diminishes your sense of ego. It reduces all kinds of suffering, bases you in the present moment, takes you away from the past and the future. It jettisons the emotional baggage of the past. It makes you forget your depression and anxiety, your resentments and your guilt. It takes away all your cares. And when you are absorbed in work as meditation, you indeed have learned how to be productive in the world, adding value to the world, and simultaneously connecting with God, because that is Karma Yoga. Unfortunately, human resource departments depend a lot on exotelic work, rewards and recognition, giving awards, rewards, increments, etc., for the work that you do. But the truth is, Karma Yoga is by far superior. A person who's engaged in auto telic work, where the work itself is the joy, where the work itself is the reward, such a person is so absorbed, so fulfilled, so joyous, in fact, so connected with God that he doesn't even realize if he has been fired, whether his salary has come in or not. This is called autotelic work. So we should engage in autotelic work. There are two types of work. One is transactional work, lena dena. I'll do this work, you pay me this much. And then there is what we call as transformational work. Transformational work is that when you finish doing that work, you are a different person. that you started that work with a level of maturity and spiritual realization. And when you have completed those years of work, you have become transformed. So to become spiritually transformed, you need karma yoga. To simply do day-to-day work, that is called transactional work. This is not to discourage transactional work. The Bhagavad Gita says, don't discourage people from working, because people are very enthusiastic to use that WONT power. People are very enthusiastic to renounce the world. If you're given a salary for doing nothing, you will be very happy to do it, because this is the nature of the human mind. The truth is, Krishna says, "Na buddhi bhedam janaye dajnana karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani yoga yukta samacharan." That don't discourage people who are attached to their work. Let them continue working, even if it is transactional work. Because transactional work is better than not working. But better than transactional work, he says, teach them how to engage in transformational work. So if you find someone engaged in transactional work, don't discourage them from working, but encourage them to seek transformational work as well. So here we have the idea of yoga, Hatha Yoga. And Hatha Yoga is transformational. The yoga asana, or how much you are able to twist your body and turn your body and your various joints, is less important than the transformation that occurs inside of you. If you engage in doing yoga mindfully, if you do yoga asanas mindfully, you will find a transformation occurring within you. So also your karma yoga, when you engage in doing your work in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, without seeking the fruits, without thinking yourself to be the doer, without indeed being attached to inaction, a transformation will begin to occur inside of you. You will become transformed. Arjun approached the battle of Kurukshetra in a transactional state of mind. He said, why should we kill all these people just to become a king? For royal happiness, why am I killing all these people? So Krishna told him, don't do it because you want to become a king. Don't do it because you want to enjoy royal happiness. You do your duty in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to me, and you shall become transformed. Indeed, your work awaits you, and your work can be the means to your spiritual transformation if you learn how to engage in acting in Karma Yoga. So make your work a yoga means to reunite with God. Your work is a meditation. It is a means for transformation of being. Spiritual transformation is the real purpose of work. Don't be misled. Don't be misguided. Give up all your old ideas and begin to realize that spiritual transformation is the real purpose of work. You must become transformed if you're working in the right manner. Why not sit in meditation? Well, it attains the same result. If you look at neuroimaging, you will find out that it gives you the same state of the brain when you work in meditation and sit in meditation. But sitting in meditation is like tuning your violin. When you take a violin and tune it, that is called sitting in meditation. You're tuning your mind. And work as meditation is when you play this violin for the entertainment, for the pleasure, for the enhancement, for elevating the moods of the people who listen to you. So tuning your mind is like tuning the violin, that is sitting in meditation. Playing the violin is working as meditation. Because with a tuned mind, when you actually work and add value to the world, you discover value within yourself, you transform yourself, you reunite with God. So work as a spiritual discipline has been there across centuries, across so many other faiths. And the important thing is you should do what you are meant to do. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out that you should do your Svadharma, not your Paradharma. Don't take up somebody else's job. Don't take up somebody else's profession. Don't take up somebody else's calling or vocation. A musician will make music, an artist will paint, a poet will write, if he is ultimately to be at peace within himself. So do what is your Swadharma. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases, said Jung. In the Bhagavad Gita, thousands of years before, Krishna said very clearly, Sadrisham cheshtate swasya prakriter jnanavan api prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyasi. Don't try to act against your nature, because what if a particular work is corresponding to your nature, what will repression accomplish? So do your duty, your Swadharma, not your Paradharma. Match your skills and your challenges appropriately and obligatorily, and your work will become your salvation. Since you have the freedom not to work, avoid this won't power. Don't get obsessed with emotional, physical fruit, money, emotional fruit, enjoyment, intellectual fruit, stimulation and learning, ego fruit, prestige and position. Let your work be Auto Telic. Let your work be a joy in itself. Engage in the work that you are created to do by your inner qualities and training to love and enjoy. Let fruit not be the primary objective, but a welcome side effect. Work hard and cheerfully at whatever you do, as if you are working for the Lord. So work, pray, and grow. Understand you are not the doer. Sattva gun leads to egoism and self-satisfaction, and consciousness has no effect, no role in your actions. They are mostly unconscious. All actions are expression of your unconscious mind and your programming. So there are 4 levels of prayer. Petition is, oh God, will you give me a Mercedes Benz? My friends, they drive Porsches, I must make amends. So when you ask God for something for yourself, that is petition. Intercession is when you pray for somebody else. Hey God, wake up. You're not doing your job looking after my wife, my friend, my children. Please, I am praying to you so that you will do something for them. Contemplation is when you don't ask God for anything, but you sit silently and commune with God. And the most important and the highest form of prayer is adoration. When you perform work, and you perform work in a spirit of devotion, and you perform that work in a spirit of renunciation and devotion. So you can see here, this is petition, this is intercession, this is contemplation, and then this is adoration. Adoration is work as worship. So this is the highest form of prayer, working as worship. So put your best in work and prayer. As Saint Augustine said, pray as though everything depended on God and work as though everything depended upon you. So be sincere in your prayer and be sincere in your work. Your work shall transform you. You will attain freedom from suffering, equanimity of mind. You will be the same in joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, heat and cold. You will be free from suffering. You will have equal vision towards all beings. So make your work into a meditation.